everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Reading Party podcast with Megan and Lexi. This episode continues our season looking at modern retellings of the Iliad and the Odyssey, ancient epics known for both brutal violence and instances of sexual assault. This episode is not suitable for under 18s. We hope you have your favourite beverage and snack ready to go, because we've got our teas and are ready to start spilling the tea on our latest ancient story.
So, yeah, let's get into it.
First episode on the Song of Achilles. Had you read this before?
Yeah. No.
Me neither.
No. I didn't know what to expect coming into it.
No.
Because I was like, all I really had heard before was, yes, it's another the Iliad sort of retellings. Oh, but by the way, it's from Patroclus's point of view. And I was like, but how can you, but he died, so what? So already knowing that, I was like, so how can you make a whole book, or the whole book has to be, because also I kind of assume at this point that most Trojan War things start with the war. So I was like,
which is, the normal, I feel, typical way to do it. And
yeah.
we stopped at chapter 17 and they're only just leaving for Troy.
Yeah.
So that is a good half of the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're not even landed on the beaches of Troy yet. What do you think of it?
It was so interesting at the beginning. I honestly got a bit lost because, you have this beautiful, well, I'm listening to the audiobook version, but also as I probably have mentioned before somewhere along the line, the audiobook reader has like the most dulcet, sort of soft, quiet voice. And so I definitely dozed off like 3 times in like 4 days that I was trying to listen, because it's like it was going so well. I was like, it's a dark, quiet room. I have time. I'll just lie back and listen to story time. And of course I fell asleep like 3 times. So that was fantastic. So I have to admit, I did get a bit confused in the beginning because I was kind of like, what is happening? But I was really pleasantly surprised by how it starts with Patroclus being like a young kid. You never really get to hear that part of his life. And then the fact that it starts kind of with him just sort of being sent, to be in the house of Peleus and stuff. I was like, oh, this is different.
Yeah. And I really was interested in how the author starts building the relationship between Patroclus and Achilles before they've even met. Because Patroclus sees Achilles competing in some games and is like, this is the most amazing person I've ever seen in my whole entire life. And then his father is very much, this is what a son should be. You suck. Why are you not like this boy instead? And Patroclus is like, well, fuck you all. And then he turns up at the house of Peleus because he's been banished from his own kingdom. And Achilles is like, not his boss, but very much his social superior. And Patroclus is just one of these, maybe 20 fostered boys that are just hanging out at the palace, all vying for Achilles' attention. And Patroclus is like, I hate everyone and everything. And I'm just going to sit in my corner and pretend none of you exist. But also stare bizarrely at Achilles because he's fascinating.
Beautiful. I'm pretty sure at some point, if I remember hearing correctly, he was described kind of as like this beautiful, sort of dreamlike, sort of like he was too beautiful to exist or whatever. That's the impression I got, at least, which was like he's morbidly curious about Achilles, and then he has these preconceived notions of who this is or how he's being brought up. So I love the sort of there's that one section where he was like, oh, we all just kind of assumed that you were getting classes and princely duties,
being a king and statecraft. No, I'm just wandering around the mountainside. Maybe I'll go swimming tomorrow.
there was like no direction. And then
it's a life we all want, really.
I loved, honestly, the sort of like the first meaningful interaction really was the whole liar lesson, right? Where Patroclus is like, yeah, I don't. He's like, I mean, you know, I don't really play. My mom's a liar, but you know, he's kind of like, you know, you could lie because I don't want to get in trouble and say that we were there together. And he was like, okay. And then you're like,
and it's kind of like that's almost the accidental way that their relationship starts, and it was so casual and so interesting because you know. If you know the story, you know what's coming next. You know how close these two people are. Yeah. And just seeing them thrown together almost by chance, because Achilles has been, well, he's not been sent, but he's gone to find Patroclus because Patroclus is in hot water, let's say, because he's not been showing up to his lessons. And Achilles is like, why aren't you showing up to lessons? Everyone's really mad with you. My father wants to see you. And Patroclus is like, we could just say I was with you. Achilles is like, interesting, lying, not my thing. And so they go to their music class together, so it won't be a lie. And it's like, on the back of that, Patroclus stuff is moved into Achilles' rooms, and they're like bestest buds.
And then they were roommates. That's where the rumor started.
The friendliest of roommates.
Exactly. That's how it starts. Because doesn't that happen when they're like 15?
They move in when they're, I think, 14 or 15, and it's kind of awkward and tense, and Patroclus doesn't. He's like super jealous of Achilles, who is, I mean, son of a goddess, absolutely blessed, stunningly handsome, has a father who loves and respects him, has the adoration of all of the kingdom, and Patroclus is like, no one loves me. My father hates me, and I've been sent away from my home, and you have everything, and I have nothing. So there's this weird tension. And I feel like he expects Achilles to be this really arrogant, unpleasant person. And then Achilles is, I wouldn't say humble, but he's not arrogant. He's a pleasant kid, and he's not mean to Patroclus. So he kind of starts thawing a little bit, and then...
I like that decision, too, to make him not the arrogant sort of peacock that everyone assumes. Because I know, you know... usually he kind of just turns into the preener, right? So by the time that, you know, he's in the war, and then he's all pouty because someone took his stuff, essentially. Yeah, I think everything that we come into thinking, oh yeah, so if he's like this as an adult, he must have been like that as a kid, very entitled. I mean, he has all the building blocks to grow up perfectly entitled, and you would have a perfect excuse. I'm the son of a goddess. I knew I was dipped into the river Styx. Blah 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 blah. I'm invincible. I'm the greatest warrior. So I love the choice to have a young Achilles even say sometimes, "Oh yeah, I'm supposed to be the best warrior of my generation, which is why no one can see me fight. By the way," and you're like, matter of fact.
Excuse you?
I mean, you're just like, statement of fact, okay? Like, I was expecting this to be in a very braggadocious way. And then the fact that he's almost like sheepishly kind of just like, well, it's not like bragging to say a statement of fact, of truth, right? And he's like, you know, not super confident about it. I was like, oh, this is different. Like, this might be the first time where I don't just sort of inherently hate or am bothered by Achilles. Mm-hmm. And that was a bit shocking to me because I'm like, wait, I don't automatically just go into, ugh, I hate him. What?
He comes across as just like a sweet kid who happens to be good at stuff. He seems really nice. I would be happy with one of my kids bringing him home. That would be okay with me.
Okay, that's good. Hey, that's positive because in no other context would you ever be like, I'm gonna just entrust my children with this person. And
no. What did you think of Thetis?
I found her characterization quite interesting because usually she's not really given much of a role in any context. And if you do have her, she's kind of this faraway personage who's, you know, either sometimes you're like, oh, she loves her son and she's begging him, do whatever you can to like stay home, have a wife and children, don't go to the war, I don't want to see you die young. And in some interpretations, I've seen her be like, pushing for him to go like, yes, my son, this is your destiny, you must be famous. So I found it very interesting. Also, I found it very interesting because she doesn't like Patroclus, which...
Oh, she hates him.
Right. So it's like, you know, to go from whatever role she does occupy, and usually only in the context of Achilles, I was very curious to see the relationship unfold between two characters you just wouldn't really think interact. And so for her to actually hate him, when I'm like, but it's her beloved son, so shouldn't she be supportive of her son's male companion? Look, it's not some, look, I hate to say it, but like in a time where like women were kind of just like shunted to the side because you're either property or whatever, you know, I feel like standard for that time period would have been like, look, if it was some like frivolous girl, I could see the mother like hating on her and be like, she's not right for you, and whatever context, or she could just hate the girl. But like to see someone in a time where people are usually very accepting of like male friends and male companionship, that bro thing, I was quite shocked. I don't know, like, what do you think about Thetis and Patroclus?
I thought it was really interesting, and I think it worked really well with how Thetis is generally characterized through the book. She's a scary goddess. She's not like the pleasant, airy robes and lights and fairies kind of goddess that you see in some other adaptations. I feel like she's much more in line with the Wrath Goddess things, deity depictions. But her whole thing seems to be that she wants Achilles to be a god, so that like he'll live forever and she'll never lose him. And like she like maybe will get over some of this. It's described quite interestingly in like his conception and her relationship with Achilles' father, like, who is by all accounts a perfectly lovely man, and it described as someone that any mortal woman would be very happy to be married to. And Thetis is just furious because he's mortal. He can never be good enough for her because he's immortal. And having that kind of taint in her son's blood of mortality, it clearly bothers her, and she's clearly working to somehow get him into like full godhood status. So having Achilles developing this very strong emotional bond and tie to another mortal, I mean, you've not only got the bigotry, like anti-mortal bias. It's a bizarre statement.
Yeah. Can we just appreciate how weird that just sounded? But okay. Continue.
She is predisposed to not like Patroclus just because he's mortal, but additionally because it gives Achilles a solid concrete tie to the mortal world that may in the future stop him attaining the godhood that she thinks he deserves. And I found it really interesting that the whole reason she sends Achilles off for his like hero training is because he and Patroclus nearly kissed. And because because she can see everything. She's a goddess. It's what they do. And she's like, I have to separate these two before this relationship gets any stronger, because it will stop Achilles becoming a god at some point. And then Patroclus completely foils her because he follows Achilles up the mountain, which is super sweet, terribly romantic. And then they have this 2-year stint learning really whatever they want to learn. They learn how to be surgeons and like gathering honey and fishing and woodworking, and it honestly sounds like my ideal vacation. But I really enjoyed that section of the book. And no, I think Thetis is a very interesting character.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just kind of glad that she plays a role, because I know, honestly, usually, I don't know, I get really excited, I think, more excited when we have sort of obscure characters who pop up and get a big role when you wouldn't traditionally think of them as having one. So I already enjoy it because she has such a role. Also, it was interesting because as I was reading this, I don't know, mortal discrimination. I have no idea. I don't even know what I'm saying. Mortal discrimination?
It's definitely not equal rights.
No, whatever it is. We don't have a word for it because we're just like unaccustomed to saying these things. But this mortal, so it's interesting to see it because on the one hand, I can see how, I suppose, obviously we haven't finished the book, so I don't know beyond what we've read, but like, okay, it kind of works for the narrative and what they're doing in the book. But it's interesting because I was thinking the whole time, yeah, but it also kind of bites a little too close for me personally into the whole trope of like, how many things do we see where it's like mortality is bad, so this is like the one thing that can never happen. And so it's kind of it's just like the superiority thing that comes back, where it's like God is good, gods are good, mortal is bad. Being mortal or being human is a weakness that like is a flaw in a character. And like I get it, it's the Greek, you know, myth, so that of course that comes into it, but I was a little just a little not bothered, but you know, I was a little annoyed when I was like, oh, we're going back into the, okay, humanity is weakness thing.
I do see what you're saying with that. I felt like it was nuanced quite nicely by Chiron.
That's true. No, he makes it a lot better, so it's not black and white, but I still kind of wish that it had maybe tried to veer in a different way. Like it's hard because you run the risk of falling into so many tropes, especially when you have like a romance, but like I guess I was kind of hoping it would just go into something else, like maybe she hates Patroclus, not because he's mortal, but because if you're supposed to be a god, you shouldn't fear losing someone. And so it's not because he's mortal. Maybe she was threatened because he's in love with Achilles. So it's kind of like, you know, you should never try to hold on to something that you're assured to lose kind of idea. To me, I think that might have been a bit more of an easy sell. I'm not sure though, because it depends. You could write that really terribly as well, but I guess just humanity being a weakness for humanity's sake, like as someone, you know, who's kind of grown up with like learning disabilities and ADHD and a billion anxiety disorders, I'm kind of like, okay, but like that runs kind of like counter to, you know, growing up with people being like, oh no, you're afflicted by all these things that make humanity a weakness, and you're like, okay, all right, I get it. Like we can overcome, you know, humans, yeah, they're kind of like fallible and, you know, flimsy little things, but like our humanity isn't always a drag. So that's the only disappointment I think I had. And it's not even like I'm super disappointed, it's just like the story's fine, I'm enjoying it.
It's just something like you noted.
But it's something that I noticed that I was kind of like, oh, okay, we're going with this trope again. But that's maybe me being a little too critical. I don't know.
No, I think it's a valid criticism. One thing I did really like about Thetis, and it feels really shallow to say it, how she's described physically. She's not a beautiful seed nymph mermaid type person. She's terrifying and has the voice of waves crashing on the rocks in a storm, and everyone is terrified of her.
You know what?
And she sounds awesome. I liked that.
The image I got when they were describing her, it's so hilarious, and maybe it's because I was influenced by watching other things. The ghostly Galadriel. Yes, evil Galadriel.
Yeah.
They were describing her, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's evil Galadriel!" So I had that image of her from the movie in my head.
I think that works. That works very nicely.
Although obviously the voice is different, because the way that evil Galadriel's voice is, she just gets a lot deeper and over here, you know. So I'm like, okay, that's different, but yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So we have evil mermaid Galadriel.
Evil mermaid Galadriel with. To me, I imagined her as being like one of those, she has like an evil laugh that sounds kind of like breaking glass.
Yeah.
I don't know why my brain does this, but like it definitely looks for parallels to like random other things. And I was like, this is wonderful. I love this a lot. But yeah, okay. So once they go up the mountain though, and they do have their sort of, shall we call it their sabbatical? Like what do we call this?
Yeah. I think sabbatical works. Like, prince training, god training, sabbatical period. Like, it's the best research time.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. What did you like most about that? Or did you just like the whole thing?
I liked all of it, to be honest. I really enjoyed the imagery of them, like, running around the forest and diving into rivers and generally having fun. Because what's been described up till that point is Patroclus' deeply unhappy childhood, and then a time in Achilles' kingdom, which is freer, but still very much surrounded by people, surrounded by responsibilities. And Patroclus, is not liked by the other, especially the other like princelings in the castle, because he's been sent there because he killed someone. He killed another boy. He shoved him. It was an accident. He fell over, cracked his head open. And then rather than being executed, I guess, he was sent away. So all of the other people in the palace know this. They think he's like cursed, he's bad luck, so they have no interest in actually forming any kind of friendship or relationship with him. So Achilles is literally all he has. And it feels, the way it's described is kind of claustrophobic, because you feel like he's constantly waiting for someone to berate him or tell him that there's been a mistake and he's not supposed to be Achilles' companion. So when they go to the mountain, it's them, and like they both relax, and it reads really nicely. It's fun and it's pleasant. And you have kind of little interruptions where Thetis turns up and Patroclus is convinced she will kill him. So he stays well. And I mean, I don't think he's wrong. I think if she thought she could get away with it, she probably would kill him. Mm-hmm. So he stays away, and then he gets special birthday gifts for Achilles on his birthday. He goes out and collects the first figs of the spring. And I'm like, this is the most adorable juvenile love story I've ever read. It's wonderful. And Patroclus is like, he feels all these feelings and he doesn't know what they are, and he doesn't think Achilles reciprocates, and he doesn't know if it's like romantic, but all he knows is he doesn't ever want to be separated from Achilles, so he can't say anything, because if Achilles doesn't reciprocate, then he'll be sent away. And then Achilles, like, on the night of his birthday, Achilles is like, I think we'll turn in early. Come on, Patroclus. And they go back to the cavern, and you're like, okay then, here we go. And Patroclus is super surprised when Achilles makes a move, and it's just adorable, and they're so happy. And then of course they have to go back, and you're like, well, shit, now there's a war, and these two have literally just had the most beautiful love story, and like, you know, they're both dying. Mm-hmm. And it was a little bit heartbreaking, and we're not even as far as the war yet.
Yeah, no, I know. I was like, I've never seen the romance really portrayed as this like puppy love type of.
It was cute. It was really cute.
I know that's usually not the word I would describe either of the men or their romance, but I'm just like, oh my god, it's like puppy love. I mean, I was like, oh my god, it could be. I was thinking, could Nicholas Sparks make this into like a movie? I want a Nicholas Sparks movie about it.
I think so.
And like, obviously we know it's going to be a tragic ending, so it's fine. We could have like a Notebook situation, just a little fantasized.
You can enjoy the lovely part while it's there.
Exactly. And then, you know, they die together. Maybe not quite, you know, hand-holding in the bed.
Why did we choose to start our podcast with one of the more depressing stories? The Iliad is like, there are so many depressing parts, and we're like, yes, this is the best way to start a brand new podcast. This will reel in the listeners. Perfect. Genius suggestion. Well done.
I was like, no. They'll understand our genius or our madness, which is you start with the most depressing because there's only room to go but up.
You can only go up.
But also it made sense. We really wanted to read Wrath Goddess.
This is true.
So we didn't want.
I'm very glad we did, because depressing parts included, I am enjoying this very much.
Yes. Yeah. Well, also, I mean, it kind of also made sense because, I mean, it's like the most universally well-known of the ancient Greek myth stories. Like, I mean, maybe people would say the Odyssey, but like, I feel like the Iliad is pretty much the most well-known.
I think the Iliad's had more attention in terms of popular media.
Yeah, because there's like 1 billion Iliad adaptations on film and TV, and there's like 3 for the Odyssey, and they're like terrible. So I was like, okay. But no, it's great. I mean, you know, it sets well, also, then there's the argument where we started chronologically, because it's the oldest.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Although, no, actually, no, if we wanted to say the oldest, we would start with like ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia.
Gilgamesh. We need to find some Gilgamesh adaptations.
I know. I want someone to do something really interesting with Gilgamesh. It's kind of a travesty that they haven't. Or maybe I'm just not looking in the right places. I'm not sure.
There's at least one coming. I've been waiting for it for a couple of years.
Please.
So, we'll get there. Anyway,
yes.
Song of Achilles.
So, yeah, no, as I was saying, I want Nicholas Sparks to do something with this puppy love romance, you know. But yeah, so we haven't really gotten to the war, but I found it interesting. So when we did get to finally, they announced that there is a war going on, and you get this all, dun dun dun, like, guess what, guys? There's a war. The sons of Atreus are calling for aid because, and it was really interesting how in this adaptation they say quite clearly that Helen, Menelaus's wife, has been abducted. She has been kidnapped. And he had, worked so hard to build a fortress to keep her safe and this, that, and the other thing. And then she was stolen by Paris. Mm-hmm. And as per one of our previous episode conversations, it was so interesting to see how, I think, is this the first adaptation that we've done that truly says that she's been like kidnapped? Because I feel like everything else she just kind of went,
With Wrath Goddess, we're told she's been kidnapped, but then it's made very clear that she's kind of ambivalent about the whole situation.
Which is probably why I don't count it, because I'm like, she doesn't care.
Yeah. Menelaus says she's been kidnapped, but then it's like,
yeah,
not really, because she's very much the strongest will claim me, and like I don't know about them. But no, I think you're right. I think with all of the other adaptations, she's gone willingly.
In some way or
yeah.
another. So,
yeah.
I as I was saying sometime in the past, I don't even remember when, but I found it really interesting because, we grew up hearing it two different ways, and it's kind of like, does one add to the story more than the other? And so for the first half that we've read, do you feel that it adds more or less, or does it change it at all, or not really, to have her be kidnapped in this version?
So far, I don't think it changes an awful lot. And I think that's because the focus is on Achilles and Patroclus. And while Patroclus is one of the scenes you get early on, is Patroclus going to kind of throw his hat in the ring for Helen's hand. He doesn't know that that's what he's doing because he's like 9, but his father takes him and like makes him make a bid for Helen. So he's obviously included in the all of Helen's suitors will go and retrieve her should she be removed from Menelaus. It doesn't change an awful lot for me, I guess, is what I'm saying, because we're looking at the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus, and I think going forward what the war does to that relationship. So I don't think that the means by which Helen was stolen, taken, abducted, or if she walked out willingly, I'm not sure that really makes much of a difference. How about you?
Again, too early to tell. I mean, I think so far, since we haven't completed the book, I can't really say in the end, but I would say I don't know how much it would change, but maybe depending on how you look at it, it would minorly influence the way we look at like why these guys went to war. Because it's like they clearly are like, they're happy, they're doing their sabbatical, they're just living life, having this, puppy love romance, and they're like, war. And I guess sometimes I'm like, well, if I was looking at it like, I was one of the boys, and then look, if it's like a woman was clearly stolen and it is an insult to the Greeks and we're Greek and we need to go defend the honor, then I'd be like, okay, I understand being taken away from my sabbatical, and I'll just, bring my roommate with me. But like, I guess, if they had her leave willingly, I guess I would be a little more skeptical, because then from the boys' perspective, they'd be like, so we're being interrupted from our sweet romance and our sabbatical to what? Go chase after a woman who just like wanted to leave her husband? Like, why should that involve me? So I guess to me that would only minorly affect them like going.
We kind of did get a little bit of that, though. Isn't Achilles kind of resistant?
Yes, he is.
To the idea of going to begin with, and then Thetis says, well, if you don't go, then you live out your life in quiet.
Like anonymity, almost.
Yeah, anonymity is perfect. But if you go, then you die, but you die a hero and everyone remembers your name.
I mean, yeah, like, he is resistant, but like, to me, I guess, or my brain at least, made it so that, like, I think you'd be resistant to go to war anyway, especially when you know it's over someone's wife who's not your own. But, like, I guess it's one thing if it's like, no, she was stolen, and it really is, like, I know you're hesitant, but come on, we have to win back honor for the Greek people to show we're not just easily conquered. But, like, I feel like he might have had cause to be more resistant if she'd willingly gone, because then he'd be like, I already didn't want to go, but he's like, if it's not even an insult to, like, all of Greece, really, if she, like, wanted to leave, then, like, why should I really have to go? So I guess maybe it just minorly affects, like, how much and how far he could have resisted or had reason to resist. I don't know. It's kind of like those old, like, damsel in distress type of, if you know she's a damsel and she's actually in distress and you have to, like, go save her, or you think she's a damsel in distress and when she's like, nah, I don't want you to save me, you're like, oh, well, fuck.
I'm good. Thanks, bud.
Yeah. You're like, oh, okay, well, fuck. You know, it was kind of like Disney's Hercules, you know, where there's that great scene where Hercules just shows up and Meg is, you know, like, in the paws of the centaur. And he's just like, aren't you a damsel in distress? And she's like, am I a damsel? Yes. In distress? Not so much. Thanks. Have a nice day. You know, and you're like, okay, bye. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it wouldn't have affected anything, but I guess that's just kind of where my mind had wandered when I initially was going over that part. So, yeah.
What did you think of Achilles' sojourn in Skyros?
Because that's where Wrath Goddess starts. It was hard for me to separate what, you know, listening to this part and not thinking of Wrath Goddess. So quite honestly, I had Wrath Goddess on my mind. So it was a bit difficult to, like, accurately judge or separate them because obviously they're different.
But you've got the alternative story kind of in the back.
Yeah, so I don't want to say it, like, overshadowed it, but at the same time I liked Achilles' sojourn on Skyros in Wrath Goddess better, I think, which is maybe why I let it sort of creep into my mind. I don't know. Were you able to sort of take a impartial look at this, or did you also have Wrath Goddess just stuck in your head?
No, I mean, I think you can't help but make comparisons, but I think because you're right, they're very different. Achilles in Wrath Goddess is there because she wants to be there. This is where she's comfortable. She's kind of building a life for herself among a community. And in contrast, Song of Achilles, he's essentially been abducted by his mother, married off against his will to a princess, forced to consummate a marriage that he is not interested in. And it's not explicitly stated, but I kind of got the feeling from what the characters did say that Achilles is probably not attracted to women, because he does say, look, I didn't enjoy myself when Patroclus questions what the hell is going on, because eventually Patroclus finds them, he turns up, and it's a great scene because the princess, I can never remember her name, Deidiamana, am I saying maybe?
Didamia? No, fuck.
Didamia. There we go. But Didamia, like, welcomes Patroclus, who gives a fake name, and they're sitting in the banqueting hall, and Deidiamana is like, have you heard of my women? And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, sweetheart. So she brings in all of these dancing girls, and there's, like, a mysteriously tall woman who dances with the princess, and the princess is very taken with her, and then they kind of turn to face the banqueting hall and take their bows, and Patroclus locks eyes with this mysterious tall woman, and it's Achilles, and Achilles is described as essentially bolting out of line and throwing himself at Patroclus. So clearly he's not there because he wants to be there, and it causes all of this, like, drama and anxiety and stress because the princess is pregnant and her father didn't know she was even married. And now there's this kind of married, very pregnant princess with a husband who has zero interest in her. And, like, so Achilles is continuing to live as a woman on the island so that he's not taken back for the war. And Patroclus is there as his husband. And it's a little complicated, but it's quite a lot of fun and a little tragic because you kind of have to feel bad for the princess who has, like, this baby, and at the end of that section of the book she's sent away to start her seclusion before anyone notices that she's pregnant, and it's a little tragic because you know that she doesn't really have a husband. Achilles will be named as the father and as her husband to, like, not shame her horribly, but she's never going to see him again, and she knows that he doesn't love her, and she knows he doesn't want her, and she is clearly very hurt by that. and kind of takes out on Patroclus a little bit. But I enjoyed it. It was sad and funny in places, but I did enjoy it. And I liked the contrast to Wrath Goddess as well.
Just because of how different it was.
Yeah, I think so. It's a very different situation. The characterizations were very different. Achilles in Song of Achilles he's more fun.
I think so too. Playful even.
Yeah, playful is a really good word. Achilles in Wrath Goddess is
just all business.
Awesome. But yeah, very much, I will protect the people I love and I'm going to fix all of the problems in the world. And Achilles in Song of Achilles is, I'm going to play my lyre and run around the hills with my best friend / roommate.
Yes. I guess maybe that is part of why I like the characterization of the time on Skiros in Wrath Goddess better, just because Achilles was happy. Achilles, she was, she'd found her peace, her place, and it was, for the most part, it was all good. And then she chose to leave, and she was like, okay, this is fine, we're good. I just felt so bad, for the princess. I mean, forced marriages, obviously, they happen a lot in history.
Yeah.
But, he didn't want it. She was sad. Again, to me, it fell a little into the tropey arena of, the unrequited love thing, which we've seen before. I know you have to add some drama to you can't have Achilles and Patroclus just have smooth sailing the whole way, and I get that.
Did it feel like an unnecessary roadblock?
It did. I'm not against putting up roadblocks to their relationship. I'm just against that particular one because we've seen it so many times. I hate to be the one to be like, trope. A few of them, and if they're subtle, minor things, okay, whatever. But if you put a couple, but they're big, I'm just gonna be like, it's ruining it just a little because it's veering too much off into this is a meal we've seen before. It's just packaged differently. I can tell so far. It's not enough that it's ruining the experience.
Do you think, based on that, how difficult do you think it is to do a retelling of a story like this that is so well known and it does itself contain some tropes without falling into that trap?
I think it's extraordinarily difficult, which is why I'm avoiding being super critical to any of the adaptations, because I'm I understand it is hard. I understand this. It includes some tropes, but let's be real, since this is one of the earliest forms of really storytelling, this is probably the thing that invented the tropes that we just copy so much. So there's also the leeway I'm giving it, which is, okay, this is probably one of the original things that invented a lot of the tropes. But I think that maybe I'm influenced because my brother-in-law is a movie critic, and I've heard him break down and talk about how movies either succeed or fall into the cheesy category. Maybe it's because I've been influenced by hearing him so much, but I definitely agree. I think there's a more delicate way of approaching these things and trying to make them not seem as tropey. There's a small lane for true sort of originality, because there's also you can choose, do you want to go close to the actual material and try to have it happen exactly what happens, or if you're doing a retelling but it's fictionalized, you do have the space to incorporate your own completely different stuff. And I think people are always going to get more in trouble if they try to just retell the original myths themselves. I think I appreciate more originality, which is I think why I liked Wrath Goddess, because it avoided a lot. Come on, Transformer Kirby, that shit ain't in myth, okay? That was nowhere in any myth. That was completely original, and I was I'm so here for it. And then the fact that you have Helen be some evil sorceress woman, I was okay, that's original. And having Briseos be a trans man, and having Mariapi be included and have that be the reason that Achilles doesn't fight, I'm oh yeah, you're not just I mean, it's based on this, but clearly different. But this to me just feels it's trying a little too hard to follow the lines of the actual myths. I feel it's still enjoyable. I think I just would have appreciated, if you're gonna go with it in this direction, still have Achilles go to Skiros, do something really fucking weird is kind of where I'm at. I'm come on, just do something that no one is expecting. But, again, the way it's written, it's, okay, now you're forced into a marriage you didn't want, and now it's unrequited love, and she's sad. But, of course, it's... The only thing that I kind of appreciate is that if I'm with the child at least. I mean, you know that Achilles does have a son, Neoptolemus, and this child is at the end of, the war at least, like, grown up. So I'm kind of like, okay, well, this would be an interesting way to have Neoptolemus described as coming into being, because usually they just kind of skip that and they either say he doesn't have a son or he's mentioned but never about how was he like conceived. So that could kind of save it, just because I'm like, okay, well, that does introduce Neoptolemus in a way where a lot they just don't, so that marks it out as different enough. But no, I think it's just suffering from trying to hew too close to the source material without being different enough is kind of what I'm discovering a little. But again, it's still an entertaining story. I would enjoy the Iliad and retellings of it in any context, just because I'm familiar and I like it. That's my little mini rant on the kinds of things that I prefer. I don't know. What about you?
The tropes don't bother me so much. They used to. They definitely used to. Just generally speaking, I mean, I think I've mentioned before, I used to be completely unable to watch mythological adaptations or read them because it was annoying. I think they bother me less now. I'm not entirely sure why. I think part of it because if they are aggressively obvious, I try and like take a step back and work out what it's doing. With Song of Achilles, I'm honestly not finding them that intrusive. The thing that is bothering you is making it more enjoyable for me, because a lot of this stuff is kind of expected. It's not Wrath Goddess. It's not a completely innovative take on a story that we already know. It is just a very nicely written retelling of the story from an angle that I don't think a lot of people have considered before. So I think maybe that's what I'm enjoying about it. I know what's going to happen. There probably are not going to be a lot of surprises in the plot as a whole, but I'm finding the development of the relationship between Patroclus and Achilles and having this really close lens on it is giving me enough innovation and enough novelty that the tropes aren't actually bothering me very much.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, I definitely know a lot of people who wouldn't be bothered by this at all. I mean, I do like how it's definitely told from Patroclus's point of view. It is different. So you're getting a very different perspective on characters that we know from different perspectives. I mean, thinking about it just last night, I was kind of thinking to myself, well, if this were like Titanic, right, where we all know what's going to happen, we know the ending, but instead of telling it from the perspective of Jack and Rose, what if you told it from the perspective of her fiance Cal, or if you told it from the perspective of her mother, or like someone else? Then I was kind of like, okay, well, would I still watch it? Would I still find it as tropey, quote unquote? And my answer was I really don't know, because again, it would depend on how it's made. So I'm definitely giving it a wide berth, where definitely still enjoying it. I just wish that I didn't notice the tropes at all. So if anything, I maybe I'm making it sound like, I get pissed and then I kind of scream no every time that I, recognize a trope. But no, usually, when I'm listening to it'll occupy maybe 5 seconds of my brain, which is, okay, well, this is kind of tropey, and moving on. So, so it's like, I guess I noticed them, and for the purposes of sort of the podcast and sort of going through and analyzing what we like or don't like about something, that's probably why I'm bringing it up. Because I think if we weren't like podcasting about it, I'd probably read the thing, think it's tropey, and then be like, okay, it was fun. Some tropes, but it's fun.
The same author wrote a book on Circe. I think you will enjoy that far more, because it doesn't rely so heavily. I mean, we don't have an awful lot on Circe, right? So there's not so much to like hang on to. And I think this is something that has come up before when we've talked about other adaptations, where there is more silence in the ancient record. It gives authors and it gives filmmakers more room to be creative. And I think that's probably what is happening here. There is so much in the source material that we just said it's difficult to be innovative. But when we get to Circe, you'll see same author doing actually some really really creative storytelling.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I mean, people said such great things about Cersei, and I've been really excited to read that. So when we eventually get to it, yes, I'll be super excited. But I don't know. I guess that's kind of like the age-old thing that I struggle with, right? Where it's like I want to intake and I want to see materials based on these very well-known stories because I'm always like, yeah, I want to know, I want to see. But also, there is less room to do because you have so much. So then that's kind of like the problem with, you know, when watching like the Troy movie, right? Where you're like, oh, I know so much. And then you see it and you're like, but it's wrong, or I don't like this. But then you're also like, but I want to like it, be entertained by it. So it's funny because in thinking about that, my favorite movie in the world is the Russell Crowe Gladiator, and you know it's not at all historical. I mean, the fact that you have Marcus Aurelius being murdered by Commodus and stuff, you're just like, okay, and then like LOL, Commodus dying in the arena, like what? So you know, like we have that historical sort of setting, but I think maybe a reason I do really like it is because they took characters from history, but then they did something completely on their own, and I was like, I really like this. So just like thinking about like the movies I appreciate best and stuff, I was like, okay, it makes sense why I probably would or wouldn't enjoy something as much. So I don't know, it's tropey, but you know what, there are good things about the tropes.
What are your predictions for the rest of the book, given that our narrator is going to die relatively soon?
Yeah, I'm curious how you fit into the other half of a book all that happens after you arrive in Troy. Because, again, as we've talked about playing around with timelines, this war is like 10 years long. Now, Achilles dies in like year 9 and a half, let's say. And Patroclus dies before that.
That only shaves 6 months off.
yeah, exactly. So I was like, I'm curious to see, because, you know, we've all seen and heard of it if you're familiar with the story, but Briseis playing a role, because if in this adaptation it's described that, you know, Achilles doesn't really seem like he's into women, because you have something so famous like Achilles and Briseis. I'm quite interested to see, like, will Achilles sort of see Briseis and be like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm into you, or, oh, I hope there's some kind of dialogue where Patroclus is like, yo, my dude, I know you're super into me, but like there's this like chickie here, Briseis, so like, are you into her? Like I want them to have some like bro talk about like whether they're like he's into her. And then you know, some adaptations have gone bold and done like threesomes with them. Please have a threesome. Why the mind out of the gutter. But I'm just like, that would be kind of interesting. And I guess one thing that was always really intrigued me is once Achilles starts pouting, I want to know what Patroclus's inner thoughts are for, you know, either convincing or not convincing him to fight. You know, oh, okay, maybe does he take his side because he just loves him and he's like, okay, yes, or will he be confused because he's like, you're mad because it's a woman and blah blah blah. So I think just the entire Patroclus reaction to like, I'm going to just sit here and pout, when clearly in other accounts we have Patroclus being like, this isn't right. We can't sit on our asses. We need to go help our countrymen. So I think that's what I'm most excited for. And then I guess I'll just slip in that I wonder if it's going to go into like a whole monologue of thoughts when Patroclus basically faces Hector and is about to get killed. What about you?
I think same, mostly because I don't see how the Achilles we've been given turns into the pouting Achilles we expect. So I don't know if there's going to be something interesting there with either like a change in character, or if the whole reasoning behind the refusal to fight is going to be different. So I'm interested to see what happens with that. I'm interested to see if the squabble over Briseis is based on a sexual thing, or if it's based on a status, you're disrespecting me by taking my prize away. Because I think most of the adaptations have gone in the direction of taking my prize rather than the sex. But again, Achilles in this adaptation doesn't seem to have the concern over his status as much as some other Achilles do.
Yeah, That's true. No, the power of storytelling. I mean, you start us young, you get puppy love, and then suddenly you're like, okay, I don't see how he can get from this to this. And you're like, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I don't know. Do you think that there might be some sort of monologue even after Patroclus technically dies? Maybe like a Patroclus from the other side, like almost epilogues it.
I think there would need to be an epilogue, and I think changing narrators and keeping going with the story would be odd. So I can see like Patroclus's afterthoughts or something similar, or maybe having just like a third person description of what happens rather than switching narrator.
I don't think that it would be right tonally to switch narrators, but because I'm like, this is Greek mythology, so anything happens. I mean, we see dead heroes in the underworld all the time, so I'm kind of like, to me, I guess it wouldn't be super weird to be like, this is, Patroclus observing from the underworld, or you could skip a bit, and then after Achilles dies, and then he
have them reunited. That would be nice.
Yeah, so maybe we get like a little scene in the underworld where they're like, oh, well, we're both dead, but hey, we're together now for like eternity here in the afterlife. Woo. I don't know. Yeah, I think I'm curious to see what kind of like epilogue situation there is. And yeah, I'm curious to see how it ends. I mean, I know it's called Song of Achilles, which I find it's cool, but it's also a little hilarious then that it's called Song of Achilles, but it's told by Patroclus, but then Patroclus has to die first, so Patroclus cannot compose a song to Achilles or about Achilles. So I'm just like, what? How does this, I don't, like, help? Like, did you find that a bit interesting, how it's called Song of Achilles, and then it's like, yeah, but our narrator dies first?
Not massively, because I think there's obviously some artistic liberty being taken there. But now that you mention it, yes, that is a little amusing.
I don't know why. My brain just picks out like the weirdest small details. I find it quite amusing to myself. I'm like, what? But, okay, sure. I'm just like, all right, cool. But yeah, so tune in next week for part 2, where we will conclude our review of Song of Achilles. Hey, thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review, and you can also follow us on social media at The Reading Party Podcast. If you'd like to leave us a book or movie suggestion, then email us at thereadingpartypod@gmail.com. See you next week.